I think there are many services that we offer in student services that the students know about, and things that we do with students that they don't necessarily share with their parents. So, you know, I'm just going to give you kind of a quick overview and then leave an opportunity to answer, you know, your questions, because I know maybe that's why some of you are here, that you have some particular questions that may support you and your students. I thought it'd just be helpful to kind of show you the breakdown with the counselors. We currently have 5 guidance counselors. Their caseloads have grown over the years. I think when I first started here 11 years ago, caseloads were around 220. So the caseloads have certainly grown to about 100 extra students per counselor. I still think they do a great job with meeting, you know, students' needs and trying to meet in small groups with students and meet with them individually. But I think it's helpful for you to see that we do have some very specific times that we meet with students. The freshmen get 4 group guidance lessons with their counselors, scheduled out 1 through each quarter. We meet with the sophomores 3 times in small group lessons, the juniors 4 times, and then the seniors 2 times, because they get so much individualized attention as seniors, constantly meeting with their counselors, bringing in college applications, having questions about personal essays. So those are the scheduled times during the year. And then additionally, our counselors meet with each student individually for their registration appointments. And I think that's just a really great service that we still offer our students at RB. Many high schools have sort of a mass registration where they go into a classroom and pass out the registration forms, and the students are actually filling out their courses there and then just submitting them back to their counselors. We do have the small group meetings, which are the meetings listed in that first section, where the counselors meet with their students in small groups. They go through a PowerPoint presentation. They talk about graduation requirements. They talk about good college prep classes that they should be taking. And then on top of that, they then meet with their students individually in their offices and go through their registration forms. We encourage students to take those forms home and have their parents look them over and sign them. So, you know, that's a guaranteed one-on-one meeting. And just to be, you know, frank, there are some students that really use their counselors, and then there are some students that don't. You know, they kind of feel like they have things figured out. They don't need a lot of assistance. Students learn freshman year how to sign up to see their counselors. Email is great now. The students feel very comfortable emailing their counselor and saying, hey, I need to meet with you. And sometimes when these students are so busy, they're overscheduled, they have very busy days, so to send a quick email when they have a question, as opposed to coming down to student services, filling out a green slip, trying to figure out when the best time to meet, because, you know, students have a 7-period day, they don't want to miss a class, and then they've got practice after school or a job, or they're going in for tutoring before school. So we try to be really flexible with students and meet, you know, their schedule and meet their needs. And I would say that, you know, the counselor's primary goal is to really work with academic advising, their schedules, their classes, and talking about college and career and future goals. And certainly they're there to meet some social emotional needs, but I would say that their primary goal is getting to know them and help guide them through that college and career process. And that starts early, freshman year, and then continues on. They stay with their counselor for the full 4 years, which I think is another nice you know, service that we have here at RB, because at some high schools they switch after sophomore year and then they have a different counselor their junior year, and it's sort of that relationship building has to start all over again. So those 4 meetings that we have with the freshmen is nice because it's not only those small groups, but then they try to meet with them individually throughout the year to really start that relationship building and getting to know the student that they're working with. So why do you contact your student's counselor? I think sometimes as parents you question, like, who do I call? Should I call? Is this a good question? You know, do I raise these concerns with my student's counselor? And I think that deciding on course selection is probably a really good opportunity, a really good reason to contact your student's counselor. If you're debating, you know, is my student, you know, an honors level student, should my student be taking an AP class? Should my student be taking 4 AP classes? What's a good balance? What's a healthy balance? Should they have a study hall? What would be a good elective? You know, my student's interested in, you know, going into an art school. Should they be taking every single drawing and painting and ceramics class? So when you're questioning what would be a good schedule or a good course selection, you know, your students, you may encourage them to speak to their counselors, but they may not come back with the full story of what they're being told. So you can send an email, you can, you know, put in a phone call, you can request a, you know, a meeting, an opportunity to come in and meet with a counselor. Just ask their advice. Like, what do you advise? You know, our students at RB take really rigorous schedules. They put a lot on their plates. And I've had conversations with parents like, is this too much? Are they going to be able to handle, you know, this heavy workload? How much homework can they expect? Plus they're in water polo, plus they have a part-time job. How much time are we talking? And so I think that you'll get good advice from the counselor on what might be a realistic balance for them, because you don't want to burn them out before they leave high school. So I think that's a really good reason to contact a counselor. I think also scheduling questions, maybe when certain classes are going to be offered, creating your students' 4-year plan. For example, we have a few classes like our engineering class and our architecture class that are offered every other year. So if your student's interested in, you know, particular electives, you know, asking, is this going to be offered every year? Should my student be taking this at a particular time? When's the best time to take micro and macro? Where should they put the consumer ec requirement? And we talk about these 4-year plans with your students, but I know they don't always share the 4-year plans with parents. So, you know, you're thinking, are they going to get all their graduation requirements in? And we're following that, but as parents, you're questioning, are they going to get all their credits in? So I think that's another good reason to contact a counselor. Also, summer school opportunities. We have health that's offered pretty regularly. I think over the last 8 or 9 years, we've offered summer school health for sophomores, and then that frees up a section in their students' period in the sophomore schedule. We've offered government for seniors the summer before their senior year. So when you've got that student that's involved in band and choir or madrigals, and they're taking a 4-year, 4 years of a language, they're trying to figure out how to fit it all in. So they may feel overwhelmed and stressed, and where am I going to fit all these classes in? So that's another reason that a parent may contact a counselor and saying, can you help guide me to make sure that everything's going to fit? You know, we can't promise them everything, but we can try to do a pretty good job to give them the courses that we want. Ultimately, we want to make them happy and give them the courses, you know, that they want. And, you know, we do run into problems with scheduling conflicts. You know, we have a lot of singletons in our building, and we have students that, you know, are taking AP German, that's offered once, and taking madrigals, and that's offered once, and AP Calc BC, and that's offered once. So it's a tricky puzzle sometimes to give students every course that they're wanting, especially senior year. We do our best, but sometimes parents want to know, you know, is this going to be a problem, and what might be some alternatives or some other possibilities to take as electives. And then I think there are times where, you know, students are going through maybe a difficult time in their life for whatever reason. They've, you know, had a breakup, they've had a situation with a friend, you know, there's something that's going on that you think their counselor should know about. And it doesn't mean that it's, you know, a heavy duty, you know, therapy session, but it might be helpful for the counselor to know, hey, I'm just going to kind of check in on this student, or I'm going to really monitor their grades. Just maybe give them a little extra attention to let them know, yeah, I know something's going on, and if you need to talk, I'm here for you. And then if there's any, you know, special situations going on at home, a family crisis, you know, you have someone who's terminally ill in your family, you know, someone's lost a job, you know, those are things that I think are helpful for counselors to be aware of. We do receive weekly reports for students that have D's and F's. So, you know, if all of a sudden a student who's never been on the radar before shows up on this report and they're kind of falling behind academically, it's nice to know, yeah, there's some things going on in this kid's life that's really impacting them. So the counselors sometimes can intervene with teachers and let them know without disclosing all the full details, but that there's things happening in the student's life that could be impacting them academically. Oh, standardized tests. I think this is one that I get a lot of questions on. Who should take them? What are they? When are they given? Why do you take them? And how do I get registered for them? You know, all of our students take the ACT. In the past, that's been part of the PSAE, and that was just a given that they would take a state ACT. This year, as we move into PARC, which is a big change for our juniors, they will still also be given a state ACT, a free state ACT that can be used for college admissions. We don't know what it'll look like next year, so parents of sophomores and freshmen and incoming freshmen, things may change. But those are, you know, questions that you might have. When should they be taking these tests? Now, you could go to act.org, you can go to College Board, they'll give you all kinds of information. But sometimes it's helpful to just talk to someone at school to get some good information as to whether or not your student, when they should be taking the ACT, how many times should they take the ACT. And all of that is really, I think, individual to the student, you know, depending on what their score was, depending on whether or not they're going to get some additional, you know, test prep. The PSAT is a big one, whether or not students should take that. That is typically a junior year test. It's a pre-SAT, and it's also the National Merit Scholarship Qualifier. It is offered to sophomores as a practice test. So as a parent of maybe a current freshman, next year it'll be offered to sophomores in October. Maybe that's a question you want to find out from your student's counselor. Should they take the pre-SAT? Is this my student even going to be taking the ACT? Other good questions to, you know, to contact your student's counselor. Concerns with students' overall academic performance. And what I mean by that is if your student is maybe just struggling in one area, you know, everything looks good except for maybe math. We really encourage parents, you know, contact the math teacher and see what's going on. Is it homework completion? Is it tests? Is it, you know, just kind of not getting what's happening? Maybe there's some skill deficiencies. But if you're seeing your student is sort of struggling across the board, or you've seen some real changes in the pattern that they had previously, you know, they were kind of an all A-B student and all of a sudden, you know, they're not doing homework, you're seeing their grades dip. I think that's a really good time to contact the counselor and say, hey, can you know, help me investigate a little bit more. We can put out notices to teachers, get some feedback. We can certainly set up some NHS tutoring if possible, if the student is open to that. And sometimes they're not really comfortable with showing up to NHS tutoring, but the counselors will take them up to the room, introduce them to Lindsay Mina, the sponsor, and get them hooked up with an appropriate tutor. And then counselors are also great with coordinating meetings with teachers. So if you feel like you need sort of an all-team meeting to hear what's happening with your student, they're good at coordinating that. I would say if you're just meeting with one teacher, you could do that on your own. But if this is something that needs to happen before or after school, I think they're really good at helping to facilitate that. And then Naviance. Hopefully all of you have heard of this program. Maybe you have not spent any time on it. But it's a web-based college and career planning tool. And fortunately, all of our students have access to this. And it is just a great resource to start exploring career opportunities and college opportunities. I love the career piece because it will take students through a variety of personality inventory and tests that we do with them in small groups. And then it will help kind of guide them and direct them to possible career opportunities that then link to the job market, that link to salary, to link to where it's kind of popping in various parts of the country. Then it will also link to possible majors, that will link to possible colleges that have those majors. So it's just like a one-stop shopping of resources for parents. And we do start with our freshmen, introducing them to Naviance. As parents, you all have your own login. You have access to seeing everything that we've done with the students in Naviance. And if you want a new login, don't remember your login, April Engelhart, who's our assistant in student services, you can just send her an email and she will send you a new password and login. And if you haven't spent any time on there, it's just a really great resource for parents. Sometimes the students forget that it's there, so it might be a nice reminder, hey, let's take a look at Naviance, and it'll help you kind of see some of the work that we're doing with students, particularly in the area of careers. And you can also find the link on student services. And I think it's really important to point out that counselors are just a resource when it comes to college planning. That conversation is really happening between students and parents, because a counselor can sit in their office and come up with all kinds of lists of where students might be possible candidates for admissions. But as parents, you know your finances, you know what you're willing to put forward to college, you know how willing and how far you're willing to let your student go away to school. So using your counselor as a resource for these conversations, but making certain that you're having them in your home and starting them as early as possible. I just want to point out two quick features. I think the Scattergram, if you haven't looked at this, is probably one of the coolest features that we have on Naviance. All those little marks are, this is actually for the Scattergram for University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And all these marks here are students that have applied to the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And if you look on this axis, it gives you the accepted average for GPA, and on this axis, the accepted average for their ACT. You can kind of see what they're looking for and who's getting admitted, and the little X's here are the students that have been denied. And this is really good reality therapy for students that have maybe set their sights on some highly selective schools, even selective schools, and you can look up, dozens and dozens of schools that RB students have applied to and kind of see, what are they looking for? What is that average ACT? What is that average GPA? And again, this is average. It doesn't necessarily, set in stone with those numbers, but it gives you a pretty good indication as to what they're looking for RB students. So this is available on Naviance, and you can look at, there's 100 schools that you could look at.
So then on the Scattergram, when you go to view that, does it give you, because this was printed in 11, it was for 06 to 10, so it will be the most up-to-date.
It will, yeah, I actually pulled this off another slide. Yeah, it'll give you up-to-date information. That's why we hound our seniors, our senior survey. We ask them if they were admitted to their schools. That's why the information that we get from the current senior class is so important, because all of that gets put into Naviance, and then it's used for future students to kind of give an idea of what the acceptance rate is. And then I think the other, useful tool for parents, for seniors, we send probably 95% of our transcripts electronically through Naviance, which is wonderful because we're not counting on snail mail, we're not counting on things getting lost in mail rooms and at colleges. So once your student is a senior and they start submitting transcripts, you can go on and monitor if they've submitted a transcript request form and if it's actually been sent. And I know this is very fuzzy here, but there's a column here that will show whether or not it has been submitted. So when students are in full panic because they're getting an email from their college that they haven't received the transcript, it's probably just because it hasn't met up in cyber world. And so you can go on as a parent, look on Naviance and say, well, yes, it's absolutely been sent, and give it a few days, and more than likely it will all match up and all is good. But I understand the students, they get panicked, like, somehow their application is not gonna, be accepted. So this is another great tool for especially, seniors, because we list all of the colleges that they are applying to there, and then that's what we use for their senior survey to go in and let us know, were they accepted, were they waitlisted, were they deferred, did they not finish their application, and then all that information is then put into the scattergrams so that we can use for future classes. This is just a quick overview of our evening programs. I know many of you have attended these, and although we do encourage students to come, they really are for parents. The Senior Countdown to College, Jerry Pope has been our speaker for years. I find him very funny and entertaining, and he's just very real. He's got 30+ years of college admissions experience. If you haven't seen the presentation and you have a senior next year or in the upcoming years, I highly recommend you to come to that. We have a freshman parent night. We started this about 3 years ago for freshman parents to come in and meet the counselors, meet the social workers. We kind of give an overview of our program, kind of similar to what I'm doing tonight, but really talk about that tough transition that sometimes students have from 8th grade to 9th grade and how we can support them. We have a financial aid presentation. Frank Pellisami, who was a guidance counselor at Hinsdale South, who is just like the guru of financial aid. Every time I hear his presentation, I'm wowed by it. He's so passionate. If you've not seen him speak, he gives great information about pretty much financing college, making good decisions about financing college, this idea of college fit, loving the campus and, loving how the sports facilities look and loving the cafeteria, but at the end of the day, what's it gonna cost you? So he's very practical, very real. And again, I think, kids can certainly come, but that is definitely a parent presentation. Our junior night for, our college night for juniors, we have a panel that comes in of college admissions counselors. Again, great for students, but I think there's just so much information for parents to hear. Even if you already have a student in college or a student that's been in college and now out, I think you can still get some great information from them. Actually in January, I think it's the 20th, we have a financial planner that's coming in, and he gives some really good financial planning advice. I think if your student's a senior, I still think it's good advice to hear, but it's really good to hear, I think, if you've got younger students and kind of planning and preparing for paying for college in the future. And then we typically have a FAFSA evening to help parents that want to, fill out that form in advance and have people there to answer questions. And then in April, we have What I Wish I Would Have Known, and I know Laura has spoken at that presentation. I don't know if anybody else has spoken at that presentation or attended, but we got such great feedback. It's a panel of parents of seniors and senior students who have gone through the college process. And they give just some really practical advice, like, what did you do that did well? What would you do differently? What was the hardest part about going through the process? How did you work together with your student? And what advice would you give to parents if they're starting this out for the first time? So that's in April, and again, we usually hold it in here, and it's a packed house. I think we're gonna have to move it to another location because we really get good feedback. And then additionally, Jim Franco presents 4 additional evenings, and it's tailored for each grade level, and that's something that he does throughout the year. And he focuses a lot on financing college and that whole idea of fit, and talks about schools that maybe you wouldn't think of. Like, there's, how many colleges out there, and we kind of, a lot of times students are very tunnel vision, they're only looking at a few, and he really talks about unique opportunities that are there that you may not necessarily consider. So that's counselor information. I'll just quickly touch on the social workers. We do have 2 full-time social workers here. We're very fortunate. This year they each have an intern that's helped supporting the needs of our students. And I would say, their focus is on social emotional concerns. Students that are struggling with anxiety and depression, possibly self-harm. Maybe students that are having some struggles with peer relationships, whether it's something that's happening inside of school. We've had kids that have dealt with some pretty serious cyberbullying things and things that are going on the internet. students that are transitioning back from hospitalization. They also work with some executive functioning support, maybe students that need some help with organization or study skills. Family changes or families that are in crisis, and then loss and grief. And you know, the social workers are school social workers. They're not therapists. So their role here is really when a student is maybe having a difficult day or something is triggering them at school. This is a safe place that they can go, you know, build a relationship with their social worker and be able to kind of decompress, kind of process what's going on with them and pull themselves back together so that they can, you know, get back to class. And I think that they do a really nice job with then making outside referrals if maybe the student's needs are a little bit beyond what the scope of school social work is. And then there's sometimes that, you know, parents are looking for an outside referral. Maybe this isn't something that they want their student to be seeing someone in school, but they would like to have an outside referral. So I think that's a good time to contact a social worker. And I think anytime you have a concern about your students' just sort of emotional well-being or changes or concerns or changes in friends or attitudes, you know your kids, and if something seems to be a little different, I think giving them a call and just asking their advice or saying, hey, could you just, you know, meet with them, talk with them, see if there's something going on. They welcome that. You know, they love the interactions with students as much as possible. And then we also do have a school psychologist, Johanna Bruckner. She's actually employed through LADSI, which is a co-op that we partner with. She does provide some general screeners, so you know, we've had her screen maybe some students with possible depression. She's done some reading screeners. As a parent, you know, you're certainly welcome to call her if you had some concerns or you were questioning something. There are usually referrals by the counselor. We have, for lack of a better term, we call them small team meetings. So we meet in small groups on Wednesdays and Thursdays where the counselors, the social workers, the deans, and the school psychologists meet. And we talk about students that may be having some academic concerns, social, emotional concerns, or behavioral concerns. So if this is, you know, if you have a reason that you would need your student to maybe be seen by the school psychologist, and again, this is more about testing, you could certainly contact your student's counselor, and then that would be a conversation that we would probably have at our small team meeting. Thrilled to have Megan Williams. She is an alcohol and drug counselor from Rosecrans. She is with us through a grant this year, and we are hopeful to continue to have her in years to come. She's here, again, 3 days a week, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. And this is just a great resource for students that are, you know, trying to stay clean. I think it's a great resource for students that maybe have concerns about their friends. I think as a parent, if you have concerns, this is someone that you can call. It's confidential. This is not, you know, you don't need to call the counselor or the social worker to get some information from her. If you have a family member, you know, someone that you have concerns with, it's nice to have somebody in our building, in-house, who knows our students, who knows our community, who's ready and willing to help the, you know, parents of RB. And she's only been with us for a short time, but she's great with kids and really passionate about the work that she's doing. So I definitely am very encouraged with what I've seen so far by the work that she's doing with students. And then lastly, we do have a licensed clinical counselor from Pillars. Mark Machusik has been with us now for probably 4 years, but probably for the last 8 years we've had a counselor through Pillars, and this is paid for by a grant through North Riverside. So Mark primarily sees Riverside and North Riverside students if needed, but he will see some Brookfield students. And this is you know, students that maybe need some additional services through the holidays, maybe need services through the summer, maybe family counseling is needed. You know, maybe there's things going on in the home that you yourself would want some advice or support from. And again, he's somebody that you can contact directly. It doesn't have to go through a counselor or a social worker if you're just looking for some additional support, or you know, you have a friend who has a student that something's going on with and you're just trying to maybe offer some support or some guidance or some advice. Again, a really nice resource to have in our building, you know, to have a licensed therapist, and we've definitely used him. We've had students in crisis that can help, you know, kind of facilitate some of the needs and support that that student may have. So, that was a lot in a short amount of time. But I was being conscious of your time, so I would gladly take any questions if anyone has any. Yeah. Yes.
The tutoring by the NHS, how do you get an update, like how your child's doing?
You know, that's a really good question. If whether or not Lindsay Minaw sends something out. I would assume that she probably would be happy to do something like that, or maybe that's even something that the counselor could help monitor.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but can you repeat what the
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the question was, do parents receive updates how the NHS tutoring is going, like is there progress? And I was thinking that Lindsay might be able to provide those updates. Or maybe that's something that the counselor could possibly do. And hopefully if you're monitoring Skyward and you're seeing the grades going up, that, you know, it's working. Yeah, that it's working.
I had another question. My son graduated 2 years ago, and we went to a panel thing where there were students there and parents, but they were mostly students who were that really excelled in academics.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't just the average student there.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe someone who's not going to college or who's going to Trenton,
Mm-hmm.
College DuPage. It just seemed like they were, like, as a student, I would have been intimidated by that group.
Yeah,
So that's why we didn't go this last year with my daughter, because it was like, where's the average family?
Yeah,
Where's average students?
and I appreciate that, and we did have that feedback as well, and I think we've done a good job now of, a better job of trying to giving a cross-section of all, you know, different types of students and where they're going. So yes, I appreciate that for sure. Yeah. Yes?
When did we receive the Naviance login information? I don't recall.
Freshman year, a letter, oh, sorry. When did parents receive the Naviance login information? So freshman year, you received a letter, and there was a little card that came in that letter that gave you the login information. So we mail them out, but maybe if it's something that came in an RB envelope, maybe it didn't get open, but all you have to do is email April, and she will set you up with a login and a password. Yes.
I had a question about Naviance as well. I remember getting the information for my graduate, but I don't remember getting for this class either. And also, since the website has changed, I wasn't sure where to find Naviance. So if you want to share, like, how we find that on the website, that would be
Yeah, it's actually under the forms, where to find the Naviance website. It's under the forms and documents in the parents section. And it's also on the student services website. But we could certainly work with Dave Fisher, our website person, and try to put it in a more prominent area for parents.
I couldn't find it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it under student services. I went under the students tab.
Okay.
Right there, so I
Well,
guess
and
I've been looking.
Well, and we did change our website over last summer, so things did get shuffled around a little bit, but thank you for that feedback, and I will see if we can't make it in a spot that's much more user-friendly for parents to find, for sure. Yeah. Yes?
I did have a parent of a freshman contact me about, what to do for academic support, and I just want to make sure that, I told them all accurate information, and what I said was, contact the counselor, contact the teachers where the student is having challenges,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the NHS tutoring. And I think in some other meeting, we talked about two different programs, one for freshmen and one for sophomores, where they're having, academic issues, that they can go to these,
Peer mentoring.
Probably academic support,
right.
which is a class during the school day, it's like a guided study hall. So that would be an option for students if they have really good schedules.
Yes. And our teachers are so great about being here before and after school. So I think that that is really the first place. If a student is struggling academically, are they trying to meet with their teacher to get some additional teaching or some reinforcement? And sometimes that peer tutoring does help with NHS. I think it's finding a good fit for the student. So sometimes it's helpful for the counselor to maybe do the introduction to the NHS sponsor and say, you know, this is what the student is kind of looking for and this is what the student needs. But definitely with starting with the teacher, you know, talking with the counselor, because quite honestly, you know, is the student misplaced? Is this a level change situation where they placed in an honors class when maybe it should be a regular class? Are there some skill deficiencies? That's doing a little fact finding to find out, is it, you know, is it something that the student can do and just needs some additional support, or is the student going to struggle no matter what kind of supports he or she is given? Yes.
So you talked specifically about the meetings that the students have with the counselors.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about the small group meetings, and you specified which, you know, what year they're in
Mm-hmm.
the small group meetings. And then you said there was individual meetings as needed.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about individual meetings as needed,
Mm-hmm.
the main meetings that I'm seeing my student have, I mean, I know it's up to the student to schedule the meetings with the counselors, but the individual meetings are pretty much just to do their schedule unless anything else is needed on an as-needed basis. But they do still meet with them individually to do the schedule.
They do meet with them individually to do the schedule, yes. And then if students have issues with maybe a class wanting a level change, or if they're having trouble with a particular class and they want to come and meet with them, again, it is, you know, it is challenging to try to schedule individual meetings with every single student multiple times throughout the year, but you know, certainly the goal is to have as many face-to-face opportunities with students as possible. And some students are in the counseling office all the time. I mean, kind of the same students that are in there that have questions about college applications. They have questions about, oh, and I'm sorry, the question was about individual meetings, how often students are met or seen by their counselors individually. And we encourage that freshman year when we meet with them during the first week of school. We show them how to sign up to see their counselor. We want them to be proactive when things are going on, to come in and talk to their counselor. You know, if there's something going on with their friends, if there's something that's happening in a class that they're not sure should be happening, we encourage that. So during the first semester, we try to get as much face-to-face time, especially with the freshmen. But we have moved up our registration process. Those of you who have older children probably recognize that we used to start registration in December and January, and we would finish it up in March. Well, now we're starting registration in November. So not only are we having small group meetings and talking about registration and meeting with individual students for registration, but we're still giving our seniors a lot of time and attention, because I think our average, the average number of applications is 9. So, you know, that's time consuming, and we want to give them a lot of time and attention. So I think it's just encouraging students to see their counselors when they need to. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Great.
How difficult is it for the students nowadays, you know, when they do their schedule way far in advance, and then they start thinking about maybe making a change to the schedule, and it's a difficult thing to do, to make any changes to the schedule. But is it still as difficult as it has been in the last few years, or are you seeing more
Flexibility?
Where it's not as difficult? If you could talk about
Yeah, so the question is, how difficult is it to make schedule changes? 10, 11 years ago, when I first started here, there was much more flexibility with that. But now I don't think we have that same luxury, and I think that's the same in most high schools where, you know, they just don't have the room to have that change of mind. Oh, I don't want this, I want this. So when students are selecting their classes, they really should think long and hard that that's the course that they want. I just had a conversation with a parent. She wants to make a change, and now would be the time to do that. Because what happens is we're really looking at each class, how many students wanting that class, and how many teachers are going to staff that class. So, you know, there's just not a lot of flexibility if a student's, well, I thought I wanted to take drawing and painting, but now I think I want to switch to ceramics. And although that sounds easy, it's a very complex puzzle that maybe there's a space in ceramics, but it's going to rearrange their whole schedule, and it's not going to allow them to make that change. So I think that by the end of January, if there's any changes that need to be made, we're going to honor those, but after that, it's very difficult. You know, it's difficult to do. We can't make any promises. And then where there's other changes that come into play is when the counselors start looking at conflicts. So we finish our master schedule in May, which is early for many high schools. I know many people in my position are still doing conflicts in the summer. We try to have our master schedule done in the beginning of May so that the counselors are working with their own students' conflicts so that they're able to call their students down and say, here's your choice. You know, we can't give you everything, but we want you to make a choice in these two classes. And overall, I think we do a pretty good job with giving students the courses that they, you know, originally select. Mm-hmm.
Along those lines, too, this is kind of more of a timing question, but when you're talking about trying, because a lot of the kids, it is hard for them to even get any electives in. And so I think the summer offerings
Mm-hmm.
are fantastic. But when do you actually find out what will be offered in the summer? Because they are making the schedule for the next year,
Mm-hmm.
December, January. Because I know when the fine arts survey used to be offered in the summer, that was on the track to do it, and then when
Mm-hmm.
that kind of was taken away, it's like, oops, how do we fit that in?
Right.
Will it ever be offered again in the summer? That kind of thing. So.
I would say health and government are the two classes that are consistently offered. Fine Arts Survey, I don't see as a class being offered, and getting a nod from, I don't think it wasn't offered last summer. It wasn't offered, and I don't foresee it being offered. Yes, and I don't foresee it. It's staffed by 4 teachers. It's challenging to staff. So that's one reason. And now it's no longer a set graduation requirement. There's other ways to fulfill that requirement as well. So with taking 2 of the same fine arts class, or 4 years of the same fine arts class, or 1 of theater and 1 of music. So there's other ways to fulfill that graduation requirement. I think that's another reason why. But for example, sophomore health. We now have students complete a form kind of committing to taking health, and instead of putting health in their sophomore schedule, we put their elective in. So we're not running into the problem where they take health, they have their health grade, health was in their schedule, we pull out health, and we can't give them the elective they wanted. So we've made some changes along the way to try and, again, give students the schedules that they want. Thank you so much for your time. And Happy New Year to all of you.